Thank you for listening to the Interactive Indies podcast. I am your host, Daniel Voth. And today I have with me a regular game jammer and a developer with Owlchemy Labs, Graeme Borland.
I like how a regular game jammer makes me sound like just an average, like a normal.
You know, it's funny because like I was like trying to think of a word, and I was like, regular just sounds so like I was trying to convey like a guy that goes to all the game jams and he's veteran. That's the word I was looking for. Whatever. We've already started recording.
Yeah.
People are gonna accept it.
Yeah.
So I think that's like something that like a lot of people know you for, and we could probably start. Maybe we'll just start there. You've had a lot of experience participating in Ludum Dares and all kinds of, including the local game jams. What got you started into game jams, or what do you like about game jams? Where did that kind of start?
So the first like organized game jam I ever did was or first larger organized game jam I did was Ludum Dare 27, I think. That was my first Ludum Dare. Mm-hmm. But before that, I did one in Winnipeg called the Room Jam. Do you remember that? That was organized by...
I remember it retroactively through like looking up archives and stuff. Yeah, which
is, it's really funny because I was like, I forget how old I was at the time, but that was a really long time ago. And it was this... The Room Jam was a jam where like people were using Flash. And it was organized by Devin Reimer, who's the CEO of Owlchemy now and my boss, which is kind of hilariously full circle.
And he used to live in Winnipeg?
He used to live in Morden, so he would come in for events and stuff.
Anyone like just outside of Winnipeg,
you'd still say Winnipeg. Yeah.
Anyways.
Of course. But anyway, that was my first jam that I'd done at all, and it was this like concept jam where like we were all using Flash, and that was like decided, and Devin had built like this structure of like everybody's going to make a game where their game is one room, and then there's this overarching meta game where like the character in every game goes through the level and enters a door at the end. Everybody's game has to end with a door, and when you go through it, you would emerge from the starting door of the next person's game, so that all the games were like linked together. And it was this ridiculous like ambitious thing of like that's super hard to do in practice because like everybody's code is like screwing with everybody else's code, and they're all like merging together.
Did it
crazy.
Ultimately turn out?
It functioned in the end. It was really cool. Like I think a lot of or not a lot, but some of the individual rooms were like kind of busted, and like it was very. I know mine was super busted because I'd never like worked with other people on stuff like that before. So I think mine like I had to like pull mine back out of the group website that it resulted in. Or anyway, but I did. That was the first one I did. Just showed up on my own. Didn't really know anybody, and
you didn't even know Devin at that point.
I think I knew of him, like I knew him just from like his involvement in the industry overall, but I don't think I'd known him like personally yet. That was a pretty long time ago.
Yeah, I know he the reason I know about the Room Jam is through his blog, which I don't think he uses anymore, or I haven't checked it at least in a while. Is Almost Logical was where he was working with, or his company before
his old studio,
or his old studio, or whatever it was. I had read about the Room Jam, and I didn't know that that was your first jam.
There was a lot of I'm forgetting names now, but there was a couple other people there who I like half met at that jam, and then re-met like years later, and it was like, hi, nice to meet you. We actually met at the Room Jam, but you were just like too nervous to notice sort of before. So there's people I like half met there that I didn't remember.
How did you find out about that jam? Like, how did you get into the community industry?
That's a great question. I have no idea how I found out about that, which is weird because like I didn't really go with a group or anything. I just like
you're just by yourself.
I just remember showing up there. This is all like I'm just like pulling out of deep memory at this point. Like I don't even have a full recollection of it. But
that was I believe that was at New Mini Manitoba Space on Waverly.
Yeah, on Waverly. Yeah, that's
so was that like a community driven event that was supported by New Media Manitoba?
I assume so, yeah.
Right. I guess it's like pretty long ago. It's hard to, like,
Well, and I
connect
wasn't
the dots.
I wasn't as involved with the community at that time, so I didn't know like who the players were, of like who's organizing what, and all that. I kind of just showed up. But
Devin, more or less, it sounds like Devin was like the guy that was
he
like
was
doing things
organizing
at that
it,
time.
and he organized that event, and like he was, since it was all like the projects were tied together for that, so he was like overseeing everything and all that stuff too.
Okay, so he was like the one that was responsible for making the connections.
Yeah, pretty
and
much.
The framework. I read a little bit about it. I don't know if you know anything about the work that was done on the framework, but it sounded like that was like a little bit of a nightmare.
Mm-hmm. It was really ambitious to get it to work like that, and it's cool that it worked at all in the end. But it was a neat concept.
Where did that end up? Like it was on a website?
Yeah, there was like, I forget what the website was, but that was it was like, it was all Flash, so the resulting thing was just a single Flash game that pulled in all the other individual Flash games into one like big compilation thing. I don't know if that still exists or what, but it used to just be on a website.
So would you consider that jam your first sort of big foray into game development? Obviously you had done some stuff before that point.
Yeah,
you had some skills that you brought with you, but was that your first time really kind of applying yourself in
definitely
a certain kind of way? Like
I
obviously
think so.
You've done stuff before that,
well, like I knew, I was writing code in ActionScript for Flash stuff at that jam, so like obviously I knew how to program a little bit, like not well, but up till that point it was a lot of like just on my computer at home, like literally trial and error learning to code, where like not even really knowing enough to like follow tutorials and stuff. I would kind of just like look up a line or two at a time and figure out what that did. And Flash sort of simplified that because a lot of it is visual, right? So you just have the shape or whatever, and then you can get the shape to move with only a little bit of code. Like it's got the graphical component and the coding component in the same window, sort of. So it was an easy like entry point for a kid who's just brute forcing their way into learning programming, sort of.
So you didn't. That's an interesting point. You didn't like. You were more self-directed and self-taught than sort of going through a course or a program.
Yeah,
with regards to programming.
Yeah, I've never taken I can't say I've never taken a computer science course, because I technically took computer science in high school, which was like Visual Basic, like learning how to make a calculator or whatever. So I technically did that one class in high school, which was not my focus at all. But other than that, and I had learned plenty of code before that. Like I was already doing Flash stuff before high school. So completely self-taught programming aside from that. And that jam was probably the first time that I actually like did a project, so to speak.
Was that like the first game you had ever made? I would imagine
the first thing you could actually play, probably.
It's funny how there's like different when I was doing research on video games like a while back, it's like, when was the first video game made? Well, it depends what you consider a video game. The OXO on that like computer, I don't know what it's called. So it's interesting to be like, oh, what was the first game you made? And you say like, oh, well, it depends. Like, can you play it on this thing? Does that count?
Yeah. Like I always did the baseline thing of like, for me it was just, there's got to be something, and the something moves around based on your input.
And that's a game.
Like that could be there was plenty of stuff I made that was literally just a grass texture and a cube, and the cube moves when you hit the arrow keys. Like that's I don't know. It's technically a game, I guess, but
so at this point when you had done that jam, it was all self-directed.
I mean, I was still
at that point.
I'm pretty sure I was still in high school when that jam
happened,
so I was like just out of it or something like that. Yeah,
right. So did that like experience at that jam? Did you already know what you wanted to do? Like you knew you wanted to do games, and did this like influence you in any sort of way to just like pursue that even more? I
mean, it got me to that being my first experience with jams. It definitely like exposed me to what that formula is and made me want to do more of that. But I was a bit like, I guess, unusual that I knew I wanted to do games like pretty much like forever. Early. Yeah, like I have trouble imagining a time when I didn't know that about myself or want to do that, which is weird because like when you're that like going through high school and that age and stuff, a lot of people have no idea what they want to do, and it's all about like figuring that out. But I was like, from the beginning, I was just like, yeah, video games, love video games, gonna do that.
I've always felt fortunate that I've always known exactly what I want to do, because like sometimes people need to find their thing, and they gotta try different things before they can get to the point where they know what they want to do. So it's nice to be able to like have something and focus on it and then further that. And
I think I kind of created that problem for myself because like I never had that experience of being unsure. So I think even within games, I eventually got to this point where I was like, oh, am I like, I'm not taking programming courses, so am I a real programmer? And like I wanted to be an artist from the beginning, so which one am I supposed to do? Like I don't know what I was meant to do or whatever.
It's interesting you mention that because I've had the same experience, a lot more recently in my own case, but I wasn't technically proficient with programming, not technically proficient with art, and that those are the two largest components of games. So I like think to myself, oh well, what am I gonna do? There's always gonna be someone better than me. And I know that's like a flawed logic, kind of, to think there's always going to be someone better. But I didn't really like know where my place was going to be. And I mean, eventually it worked out, and I'm like a project manager with bit-space development, making games and all these different kind of things. So, whatever I did worked out. I don't know, like I know what I did, but like if someone were to ask me, what do I need to do, like an itemized list, I'd be like, just be passionate. It's so cheesy, but just be passionate.
Well, it's kind of true. Like, I don't know, you just do what you're interested and motivated to do, and then eventually that forms your identity as a developer of whatever kind, and then you end up fitting into some role. It's not like you chose the role, it's just you choose who and what you are, and then that becomes something eventually sometimes.
So how did you translate that into a professional career? Like, did you go to a secondary education to like...
Yeah, so I didn't do much of it intentionally. I went to Red River College for digital media design, so I was going to school for art.
Everyone, any creative person in the city, like
absolutely
99% of the people I've had on here, it's like all DMD students, which is great.
Yeah, and that's what happens is when you're looking at like, if all you know is, oh, I want to be a game developer, and you were looking around at like school opportunities at that time, it was just like, oh yeah, this thing has like a bunch of computers in it, so let's do that. It was either that or like, computer science at U of M or whatever, if you're really going that route, which wasn't me at the time. But I did. I was really into the DMD program, did that for 2 years, and then I went back for the third year. They had like an additional course on top of that for like advanced 3D graphic stuff. So I did the 1 year program after that. And mostly throughout school and mostly during that third year program, I was doing like game jams and stuff on the side, and a lot of not like organized game jams, but just doing like small projects,
like just on your own.
Yeah.
Oh, like I did. You use that? You use the jam format, like
kind of. I did. Well, one game a month. Like I did that as like a New Year's resolution, I think, that year, and I stuck with it for like 3 or 4 months, I think. Which was like, that was a lot of work because I was in school at the same time, obviously. So, and
DMD is not like a
so that was the third year, which was actually good because we like the computer lab for that course, you could just like go to whenever, like stay way late after class and like work on stuff in there. So that's what I used to do. I would just like show up early, do my schoolwork, and then after classes and homework and whatever, I would just stay there till like 9 or 10 p.m. some nights and just work on my own stuff on those computers. That was like my most productive year ever. But like I don't think I've ever topped that in like sheer number of games that I put out, because I was literally doing one a month for a while, and then like Ludum Dares on top of that, and all my like some schoolwork that I was like really proud of and stuff too. But so you were talking about like how that actually translates into like being in the industry, I guess, right? Like, because I still wasn't at that point coming out of school. So like I I got out of the third year program, I got an internship or a work placement at Complex Games. So I was doing 3D art, which is what I like was educated on. So I was a 3D artist there. I also did like QA for them for a while. I think I worked there for about for a few months. I forget exactly how long.
Not like a super long time, eh?
Not a super long time. Like I did the work placement we did out of school was pretty short. I forget how many weeks, but I got hired out of that to continue working there, but it was only for a few months before I switched over to Owlchemy Labs, which is where I am now and have been for like 5 years, I think.
What was the experience like working at Complex?
It was fun.
That was like your first like.
Yeah, and that's like in Winnipeg. That was like a huge studio of like that's the big leagues in Winnipeg.
Yeah,
to be like
you see some of the people that some of the clients that they have, and it's these things that everyone would know.
Yeah, well, and
like
you're working
Disney
on
or whatever, and Zynga, I think.
And we were working on big projects too. Like they had a sizable team, so it was like they have specialists of like programmers and modelers and QA and like all these departments and stuff. So I remember like back at school, people would talk about when we were getting our work placements, people would talk about Complex as like that's the cool place that like everyone who's interested in games obviously wants to get. So
like I would imagine like you're thinking to yourself, wow, this is like really I don't know.
Yeah, it was fun. Like those were the biggest, really big projects to have a chance to work on and stuff was something like that I hadn't really done before. So it was cool.
So going from Complex to Owlchemy, you didn't have like a personal relationship with Devin, but like you had been at a jam that he had organized.
Yeah, well, and I knew him a bit better by then because we had like I'd gone to like other meetups that he'd organized and stuff, and been to other jams since then. I knew him a bit better, not super well, but when I went over to Owlchemy, that was basically because of like my personal relationship with him, basically, or I guess professional relationship still at that time. But
earlier you talked about doing what was it called? One jam a month. One game a month.
Yeah. Which is still going on.
You're still doing it?
No, I'm not still doing it, but that event, which I started like years ago
that
in school,
organization is
there
still
are people
running.
who have still been doing that, which is pretty insane. Yeah.
I feel like at a certain point, once you get so many going, it's like you can't stop, even if you want to.
Yeah, it's a really cool exercise.
And I saw like a kind of a parallel. One of your Twitter accounts that I follow, GB Sketchbot, which is like in the similar vein as like you're doing something every day. Granted, not every month, but it's like a consistency thing.
Yeah.
Is there something that you like about like doing a certain amount of projects in a certain amount of days? Like, what do you like about that?
I guess it's consistency. Like, the Twitter account you're talking about, GB Sketchbot.
Right, I guess we should like.
I'll just like briefly like I do a sketch of the day project. So every day I just post like a painting or a pencil sketch or whatever. And I've been doing that since January 1st, 2012. It was my New Year's resolution on 2012, and I just kept doing it. So I don't know if I meant it to go on for like more than a year at the time, but I did, and now it's been like,
stop now.
Yeah, it's been like 6-7 years now. I'm at like, I think today's day 2461. I'm pretty sure, but I don't know. I just love like that reliability of I don't spend more than like 15-20 minutes on it a day, so it's pretty manageable, and like it's obviously part of my daily routine now, doing it for years. But throughout all my like life changes that I've had along the way, like I've switched jobs, I've moved multiple times, and like gone through big life changes, but that's a constant where I'm like, I know at the end of every day, like I put something new out, maybe it's not good, like a lot of sketches are just really bad and I'm not proud of them at all, but like I put something out and like people know I'm like still alive, like he's still trying, he's still practicing, like I don't know, and hopefully improving over time.
I don't think it's good. I don't like this idea of not releasing anything because it's not perfect. Because you're never ever, if that's the logic you're using, you're never putting anything out there. You're never like making yourself vulnerable in a way, like through your art.
Yeah. Well, and it's about expectations too. Like that's the stuff I'm putting out daily. I don't expect to get any attention. Like a lot of the, I posted on social media on like Twitter and Tumblr mainly, but like no one, those barely get any engagement, right? Like no one really cares about that other than me. Just for like me knowing that it's been this big consistent
So it's
thing.
more something for you than it is.
Yeah.
Even though you do post
and
them,
some people are into it, which is
yourself.
great. Like it's got a bit of a following, but it's not like.
I have two of your friends.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, like it's never something I could sustain myself on, or like, and the amount of following I have proportional to the amount of time I put into it is like nothing, but I still enjoy doing it, and that's like the point, I guess. But yeah, like it's a bummer when people aren't willing to put something out unless it's perfect, but there's varying goals you could have there for sure. Like I wouldn't want to. I didn't continue doing the one game a month thing because I felt like I was getting sort of diminishing returns on that of like doing I was always like working super hard to try to get something out because it requires so much effort to like put together a playable game in that amount of time. Yeah. So if I didn't work super hard, I'd just be putting out garbage and it wouldn't be worth doing it. So I figured I would just spend that time doing other stuff.
Right.
But with this, the time investment's so low that it's kind of that equation just always works out where it's worth it.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see like your sort of self-directed, the point at which you were sort of taking a self-directed approach to learning, and then going to the jam, and then going to school to further your education, ending up with Owlchemy Labs, which is like a huge thing in itself. I would imagine that's a pretty big milestone for you.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Right?
And it's like I've been there through a lot of their growth too. Like I was when I
that is always, sorry to kind of cut you off here a little bit. I love being a part of something from the beginning, and then you can have a noticeable effect on the growth of the thing that you're a part of. So I don't know if you can speak on what that's been like to be a part of that.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, yeah, it's funny because I felt weird about that. Like when I joined Owlchemy, I was the fourth
that is crazy person to me.
Yeah,
like,
and it's
that
like
is so crazy to me.
20 plus, I think 22 people now. I forget the exact number, but yeah, like at the time they had been around for a few years and they'd put out games, and I was like the new just finished college, like gonna join this indie team guy, and I felt that way of like being the new employee. Like I was joining this team that had like they were very good at what they did, and like had this reputation established of like games they'd made, and I just felt like really new all the time. But I've been around so long that like I've now wrap back around of like the 5 years that I've worked there is the majority of the time that the company has existed now, because like I've just stayed there for so long. But yeah, it's weird, like growing from 4 to 20 whatever people.
There's this picture that I always think of whenever I think about Owlchemy and your sort of involvement, is that picture when you're in the backyard of Devin's house.
Yeah, in the snow.
And I think there's what's his name? It's Devin,
Alex, and Carrie.
Alex. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, there's Graeme. There's like 4 people there, and Graeme is one of them.
Yeah.
That seems like a cool like little thing there.
And that photo was taken 2 years after I joined, so like it stretches even farther back. But it's been wild.
So watching from the outside, looking in, I see like all these news things, like the being included in the launch, one of the launch titles for the Vive, and then all these different things like with PlayStation and what's it called, a Rick and Morty simulator, and the new vacation simulator, and all this stuff. I think it's really cool, and knowing you, I just get even more excited that like knowing that you're a part of it. So I would imagine that whole experience has been like pretty kind of surreal for you, maybe.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's because everything Owlchemy puts out is so much like it's orders of magnitude bigger than anything I could manage on my own. Obviously, like we have tons of really talented people working on stuff, so it's just cool to be a part of that stuff still.
Right. One thing I was so again, we had like talked about like what got you up to this point, but I'm also interested in like in the origin story in terms of like the very beginning. Like what sort of influence, like as you were growing up, as you're like a kid, what influenced you in that direction? Like who were kind of the people that sort of facilitated the games, you wanting to get into games at such an early age, or knowing exactly what you wanted to do?
That's a good question. I don't remember like a turning point moment or anything like that. I've had like, we had video games in the house like growing up and everything. I started with an N64, my first game.
Oh, I love these origins.
I think the first game that we had like in my family's house, I think, was Mario Kart 64. But my first game was probably Pocky and Rocky.
Pocky and Rocky?
Yeah, I think on Super Nintendo, I'm pretty sure. And we like borrowed that from our neighbors or something.
Oh, the classic borrowing.
Or something like that. And my grandparents had a Super Nintendo too, so I played like Final Fantasy, one of the Final Fantasies on that. But
so just playing like games.
But yeah, like I was around games for a long time. Got my first computer pretty young, like early teens. My parents were always like really supportive with like getting stuff, and they like I showed an interest of like just messing with computers from really early on, so like they got me my own computer and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was kind of always just doing stuff like that. I just like building things, I guess. I would like build, robots out of like pieces of like recycling in the garage and stuff when I was like even younger.
Were you a Lego kid growing up?
What's that?
A Lego kid?
Yeah, exactly. And like the what's the train, the wooden train tracks that you put together? Is it Brio?
I don't know.
I had one of those train things.
I know exactly what you're
talking
all
that kind of stuff. And I would like just building things that were like, it wasn't anything, but I would just like tape trash together and thought it was so cool. But
it's interesting to like think back to those like times, not just for yourself, but even like anyone. And then when you eventually like fast forward and you're looking back retroactively, it's like, wow, I really like. Ideally, you would have turned that sort of childlike wonderment of games into something like I don't know, just into something, I guess. But I wanted to talk about or ask you about some of the game jams that you worked on.
Okay.
Actually, I want to start with this one. This one's not a game jam. Okay. This is me trying to like dig in the archives, and I'm actually going to pull it up on my computer here. So for people that are listening, I'll figure something out. Either I'll post a link to it in the website or something. I don't know. Or I'll cut it out. We'll see. We'll find
Are we actually booting up the game? Is that it?
Yes.
Oh, man. What is this going to be?
Do you see it?
This one?
Do you see it?
Okay. This is fun. This is a fun one.
So I thought it'd be fun to do something different. Like generally I don't ever like pull anything up on the computer.
Okay.
But so I'm just gonna like have it running here, and you want to talk about this game. It's super. Oh gosh.
That volume.
Yeah, let's turn that down a little bit.
Rockin' soundtrack.
Super Rooftop Chopper Fighter 3D Cybercopter Apocalypse.
Cybercopter-apocalypse.
Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, you're fighting cybercopters, so you're in the cybercopter apocalypse.
Oh, cyber. Okay, yeah. My apologies. So what's the like origin of this game?
I think that's one of the one game a month games. I'm pretty sure. That's from back in I was in college, it's just a ridiculous game where you just like you're on a rooftop and there's like just endless like enemy helicopters coming at you and you shoot them. But actually the genesis of it is interesting because it connects to what we were talking about before, where the game I made for the Room Jam way back in the day was basically so just to talk about the Room Jam a bit more, there was a theme connecting it where all the characters were the Golden Boy, like to make it Winnipeg themed. So my game, for whatever weird reason, was the Golden Boy was like running around on rooftops and like shooting at enemies, like really basic, like, kids first video game stuff. But I remembered that for some reason and then made this Super Rooftop Chopper Fighter 3D out of that, where it's just like a more refined version of that, I guess, where you're just this guy running around on a rooftop shooting at enemies. But like I made it in college, so some of the other people in my in that computer lab with me, like there was this one guy just did like a bunch of voice acting for it because he was like, sitting nearby in that class. So I'd be like, hey, Dan, his name was also Dan. So it's, it'd just be like, hey, Dan, you want to like just do voices for like this weird, I just need like a weird gruff sounding guy who like yells at helicopters. And we just we were in the school. So we went down to the school's like recording studio and like did a bunch of VO. So this game has like way more VO and like production than it should have, just because we had access to those like resources at the school. But
it's fun sometimes to do like to overproduce a part of something that doesn't necessarily need that, because it adds. I feel like that's like the fun thing about this game. It's got like a vibe that's like it's just my like the way that I view it, it's just a rooftop, like you jump and you shoot, but it's got all this like this copter comes in, and then
it's got a story. There's a campaign mode. There's like online leaderboards. There's all this stuff. But but it's funny because I was obsessed with like putting polish on everything and like making it look and sound really cool, but the game design itself is just like terrible. Like there's an endless mode that you can just completely break and like it goes on forever, and I just like did not have the experience to like make good decisions for game design stuff. I remember I actually did a Winnipeg Unity user group presentation on this game a long time ago.
I saw that. I actually that's one of the I found this game and I watched like maybe 5 minutes of it or something.
But it's one of those like moments in my past that like I like remember every once in a while. Is at that talk at the end, it was just like Q&A, and there was this. I had like talked about the endless mode or whatever and how it didn't work, and like people just kept playing it forever. And Devin was in the audience, and he just asked a question of like, it was something like super basic of like, oh, why didn't you just like give the player 3 lives and then like see how far they could get instead of letting them continue forever? And I was like, yeah, that would have been like extremely easy and solved like all these problems. I don't know why I didn't do that. And like that was one of those moments where I was just like, I realized I wasn't good at game design, or like I had just never thought about it before. And I'm like, actually there's this whole other area where you need to like pay really close attention to what you're making and that kind of stuff. But yeah, so a lot of my games around that time were like this, where they had like, I put tons of effort into the art and the assets and like the feel of it and everything, but they were just like empty on the inside.
I noticed like that it seemed, I thought because I was like kind of going in the archives a little bit, or my perception was I was going in the archives.
Well, that's pretty old now.
I was going to download this game and it was going to be a little bit janky.
Oh yeah.
Just because everyone's first games are janky.
Yeah.
Well, I was like, wow, this like has a story, and it has like a very much like the Telltale style vibe, like art style. And I was like, oh, there's this story, and I'm like, oh, okay. Like I'm like reading it now. I'm not just like playing this just as like a novelty.
I mean, to be fair, I had done like probably half a dozen small games before that, so it's and I was in school for art, so like that's what I was focusing on and trying to make it look pretty above all else. But it aged surprisingly well, like for how old that is. It's still like I still chuckle when I see it, and it's like I don't know.
Is this when was the last time you thought about this game or seen it?
Not anytime recently, that's for sure. Probably measured in years at this point. But
that's what I was going for.
Yeah, I think about that moment from the user group where I was like having to defend like my not really defend, but like just having to talk about like why I made decisions and stuff. I think that was one of the first times I like talked publicly about something I had made. So that was like sort of a bigger moment. But
so other than I'm leaning in here so I can read it. Other than Super Rooftop Chopper Fighter 3D, which is not the full title, just to clarify, what are some of your more jam specific? What are some of your favorite jam titles that you've worked on?
Favorite ones? Yeah, it's hard to. I've done a lot. I think I've done like over 20 at this point. So,
are there any that kind of like stick out to you as being kind of?
Yeah, there are. There's. I want to say, Sword the Court is like the biggest one I've ever worked on. That's one that like some people actually know about. because it just it got really popular on like YouTube. Like Let's Players just latched onto it for whatever reason.
What is what is Sort the Chord about? What's the like? Maybe you can talk about the how that game plays.
Sure. Yeah, that was it was for a Ludum Dare where the Ludum Dare theme was I think it was a Thai theme because it was
growing and two buttons.
Two buttons was the one that I thought of most. But yeah, growing. So we did like growing a city.
Right.
And you played as a king. You just sit on your throne. People come up to you. They ask you a question, and you just say yes or no, Y or N. And then like you have like a population stat, wealth, happiness, and like these basic stats go up. And it's like this micro city builder thing that's just yes or no answers for everything. And we just like made a bunch of cute characters for it, and like tried to. Who
did that? Worked on the art for that one?
That was my partner Amy. Did all the art for it, and like a bunch of the writing and stuff too. Like we work on a lot of stuff as a team, so it's kind of just like contributing to everything. But we just jammed a bunch of like interesting characters into it, and people responded well to that. I guess like they just like the cuteness of it and the writing and stuff like that.
What is that experience like, having so many people receive it so well, and like having such a positive reception to it?
It was funny because that has been orders of magnitude more successful than any other jam game I've done and probably ever will do, because it was just this fluke thing that like people latched onto it, right place at the right time thing.
That's not to say that I've seen a lot of the jam games that you've done that have been placed, because like Ludum Dare, for people that aren't familiar, they have like a competition track, and they have like rankings, although it's very much like it's not really competitive in nature.
Well, you don't win anything. It's just for fun.
And a few times I've seen your name listed in like the top 5 or whatever for whatever category it won. So you've had quote unquote success with jam games before, but this one, in terms of
it just reached the general population more. Like usually it's stuff stays within game developer circles where you're making games that mostly other devs are going to play because they're the ones who know about game jams. It's not like average people who are just like video game players are going to find out about that, really. But that was the case with Sort the Chord, is a lot of people just found out about it through YouTube and stuff.
When was the moment that you kind of realized, or you noticed, like, wow, this just like blew up?
Well, it was literally just a moment. We put it out for Ludum Dare, and I think it was about 8 months later. Like, it was just an average release. We did okay in the Ludum Dare. Like, we were happy with it. And then 8 months later, a video went up. Yeah, it was a super long time later. We put it out in the December Ludum Dare, and it was like halfway through the next year that I forget what the first big YouTuber. There was I think it was a French YouTuber was the first one with like, he had like 500,000 subscribers or something, like just this huge number, and he did a Sort the Chord video out of nowhere, and we were like, what is this? Like, how did he find this? How did this happen? And like we were getting tons of views from that and everything. But then the Let's Play thing happened where it snowballed up to like that person had enough traction to get other people to notice, and then other people did videos, and it just like cascaded forever until we got to this ridiculous point where like it's so like no one knows where this game came from. Like, so many people are seeing it, only a fraction of a fraction even know that it's a game jam game. Like, they just think it's a video game, but in reality we put it together in like 3 days, and it's just this tiny little toy. But
and people may not connect that to you or Amy.
Most of the people who saw those videos have no idea who we are. But we just like sat back and watched it, because there was no difference between that and any other game we'd worked on for other jams. So there was really nothing like riding on that. Like, we weren't trying to take that and turn it into like our indie studio, like we weren't trying to turn a profit from it or anything. So we kind of had this casual approach to it of like, oh, this is blowing up, like that's fun, let's just watch it. And like we did some updates for the game because like people were super into it, so we like delivered a bit more like content on it.
So you facilitated that growth a little bit just by like providing little updates, but you didn't really sort of try.
It wasn't really for a goal. Like we almost like felt bad for people who were playing this game that was supposed to be this really, really tiny thing, but they didn't know that. So they were just like, oh yeah, this game's cute, but like it gets boring after 15 minutes. or like people would be playing it for like super long period of time, like an hour or something, and we'd be like, yeah, you're supposed to play it for like 5 minutes and then like laugh and then move on to the next one because it was for Ludum Dare.
Right.
But yeah, like we ended up almost out of like feeling bad for cases like that, we like put in a bunch more content and like gave it like a real main storyline, and like it didn't support saving and loading so originally, so people who were like playing it and wanted to come back to it, they were like, why didn't it save my progress? And we're like, why would I put saving and loading into a Ludum Dare game? Like that's so much work. But they didn't know that, obviously. So yeah, we just finished it up, I guess, and got it to a point where we were like happy to leave it. And
so you're not like working on that one anymore?
Yeah, I mean, like we haven't touched it for over a year, maybe 2 years at this point. But
you'll wait for the second like wave of like YouTube videos, and then you'll start adding like
well, it's still
all these different crazy things. Just got a third button.
Yeah, too much. But yeah, like it's sort of self-sustaining at this point. Like there's new people are still finding it all the time, just because it's like out there so much.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
But yeah, like we're not. Yeah, people know it's been out for a long time, and it's not like that's our current project or anything. It was for a while. We probably, worked on it like kind of part-time for most of a year after it got popular. But
so generally, do the two of you work mainly on jam games in your free time, or do you ever do like kind of side projects?
We've tried to do larger scale things.
Yeah.
They don't usually work out just because we're like both working on bigger things as like our main thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, jams are usually like the thing that works just in terms of like scale. Yeah, we've started a few things and like just given up on them and messed around with other stuff, but it's easier. Jams are always the go-to.
Right. Easier to do a jam game and iterate on that here and there.
Yeah, because it'll like sometimes you make something and you just feel like, oh, that was a really special project. Like we did it super fast, but it really turned out well, and you have an attachment to it. And then like making the decision to work on it afterwards is so much easier when you have a playable thing sitting in front of you, and you're like, do I want to continue working on this versus not? Instead of, do I want to build this huge thing that I don't know about versus not?
So there's another jam game that I know was done at a jam,
as they tend to be.
Right. I always butcher this. Mirror Mortis.
Mirror Mortis, yeah.
Mirror Mortis.
Which the original name was much harder to say. When it was first created, it was called. I can't say it because it's in French, so my accent is like bad. But it was Miroir du Mort, which is like Mirror of Death, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, that was way too hard to say, so we made it Mirror Mortis.
What jam was that made at?
That was a Ludum Dare as well, I believe. Yeah, 30 something.
What was the theme of that one?
I believe that was unconventional. Was it unconventional weapon? I think
was I at that jam?
I believe
Maybe?
so.
I feel like I was.
Yeah, it must have been an unconventional weapon, because the whole deal with that game is you're playing as a vampire, and there's like beams of light, and you're holding a mirror, so you reflect the light to like damage enemies and stuff. So you don't really like, you have no offensive ability, you're just holding a mirror, and like you can manipulate the environment by like reflecting light.
Does that one sort of stick out to you as being like a special project or whatever?
I guess so. Yeah, like it's one of the ones that we took further after. I think we did okay in Ludum Dare. Like people responded to it well.
Right.
So yeah, we did. That one is another one that we worked on more afterwards. I think for about 6 months, not like full time or anything, but just like on weekends and stuff. Yeah, because we thought it had potential, and it was kind of like the design was based on like having interesting levels. So we felt like we had sort of proved out the mechanic, and like, oh, this is kind of interesting. There's something interesting here. Let's build out like a big world for it to take place in, and have like interesting levels and stuff like that. So we did work on it for a while, expanded it, added a bunch of stuff, and then tried to put it out as like a product. Like we put it out as, buy this game for a couple bucks. And that was the only time I've ever actually done that.
So you were just kind of experimenting with that kind of
we
process?
just wanted to see if it would work. Because again, like didn't have a huge amount riding on it. Like we were still doing sort of quote unquote normal jobs as well.
Right.
So it's not like we were trying to bootstrap a studio or anything, but we just wanted to see if that would if anyone would care if we put that out. Not a lot of people did, which is fine. But it was a cool experience. Like, we didn't go all in on like marketing it or like trying to do everything right, but it was still an interesting experience of just seeing what's involved versus like doing a free jam game where you don't try at all, sort of.
It's fortunate that the sort of scenario in which you created that game wasn't dependent on, like, you weren't dependent on the success of that game to sort of move on to the next thing.
Which is like, that's a lot of my experience that I've had, which I realize is like this super privileged thing to be able to do, of just like, I've done all these weird experiments and put stuff out and I don't care if they succeed or fail and stuff like that. Like, not everybody gets to do that, but I've just had the chance to do a lot of that in my past, I guess.
And you can kind of realize in that scenario, if you were dependent on it, you can see how like volatile that could be if you're like trying to structure it as your like breadwinner. I don't know if I'm using that term correctly. To be able to sustain yourself and to be able to live and pay rent and stuff like that.
Like even the more successful projects we've had like that, whether we tried or not, the thing it always comes back to is like, I've done dozens of small games and only like 2 or 3 of them have gotten any attention outside of like the jam itself.
And they're all great. I think they're all great games.
Well, so and that's the thing is like, it doesn't, their quality has nothing to do with the success rate is like the important thing. Like, there's a lot of them that I love that just no one will ever play, and that's fine. But like, if you're trying to like run a studio based on that, it's so unpredictable, and just no experience I've had doing that has ever felt to me like I understood why something was successful. Like, that's just never happened in my like independent work, I guess. But
what would your advice be to people that are trying to pursue games professionally and to maybe see a return on something? Like, what is the right sort of approach and right attitude to have towards it?
I think that's different depending on like what your goals are, and it changes like all the time since the industry is like so rapidly changing. But I think the core thing that I think is kind of always important is just to always like produce stuff in some way. And that's not to say like just release everything you make even if it's rough. Like there's there's value to crafting sort of an identity or a brand for yourself of putting out like cool polished projects. But if you're trying to start up an indie studio and you spend like 6 years working on a game that like no one gets to play, like that's not gonna, the conditions of the industry are going to be different when you release your game versus when you started. And like, you kind of have to work at a smaller scale or a smaller iteration time of like getting stuff out for it to even be like relevant in the conditions that you started it in. So I don't know, that was helpful for me, is just to be cranking stuff out all the time. Like even if you start doing jams or like doing monthly games, and then you're like, okay, now I'm going to spend 6 months making a game and see how like good and refined I can make it. And then maybe take a step back from that, do a few more small projects, and then try a slightly bigger one, and just like step up and up and up rather than try to make something big off the bat. So
if someone's like, your advice to someone that's looking to get into games as a young person would be to just go to game jams and just make games and just do the thing? I don't think there's any better entry point than game jams, especially if like there's you can self-teach a little bit at the beginning to just like, you need to figure out how your tools work and like at least the very, very fundamentals of like what code is if you're going that direction and stuff. But like it's so you can just show up to a game jam, and even if you don't produce anything, like just being there and looking over people's shoulders can be like really eye-opening as to what actually goes into making a game. There's really no other way to like find out about that by like, reading textbooks and stuff doesn't give you the context of being there with developers and seeing what you actually have to do to make something come out the other end. If you had to boil down sort of what led you to where you ended up and influenced you to get there, like what are the strongest factors that contributed to you getting there? Like, for example, working with alchemy, and not even just that, but like complex and you know,
there's a lot of steps to get to that point.
Sort the court, you know, and the traction it got. What were the largest contributing factors that you felt helped you get to these milestones?
I think the biggest net thing is literally just luck in my case. Like, I think
that's fair. That's fair. Yeah,
I honestly think that, like, I've had I'm coming from a super privileged position where I've just been able to work on this stuff, and like the biggest thing on my part is just being persistent and like continue. Like, I've always loved doing this stuff, so I just work hard on it and have always done that and not really like given up or veered from that track. But I mean, tons of people do that, right? Like, it's not this insane thing to say like, yeah, stick with it and work hard. Like, that's not going to automatically do it for everybody. But in terms of things that I consciously did for myself, that's all I did. And, you know, got to be in the right place at the right time with a lot of stuff. But I don't know. It's like everything is a gamble. Everything is luck based, but you can do things to influence your luck. Like, if you're just rolling the dice, roll the dice 100 times, because that's going to be better than rolling it once, you know? Like, just put stuff out, keep working. Nothing you do will make your chances 100% or even close to that, but you can just keep trying as long as you have the means to. So I don't know. That's not like super inspiring advice, I guess, but
I think
I'm always leery of telling people like, oh, here's exactly what I did to get where I am, because there is nothing. Like, I'm here because of that's what my specific life led to. Like, there's not much reproducible path to that.
Right.
So, I don't know.
Was there anyone any like person that stands out as being like a positive influence on you, or someone that went out of their way to kind of guide you along the way in a certain sense, or was it more just like a self-directed journey?
I definitely started out self-directed, and just kind of like my parents, by being supportive and like, you know, letting me have a computer in my bedroom when I was a kid and stuff like that. Like, that's obviously put me on the track to start doing stuff. But all throughout, like, school, professors in college, and everyone I've ever worked for, like, as a boss, has been like, Noah at Complex was really great to work for, and like that environment taught me a lot. And then Devin at Owlchemy, like, having just a huge amount of faith to hire me into that small indie team. Like, that's a big risk to bring on a new person into your really small team. Like, having that faith in me and like continuing to let me like learn on the job and all the stuff like that. But I've been really fortunate to work with awesome people, and people who've like supported my growth too.
And I feel like you also volunteer a lot of your time and energy sort of giving back through different things. Like, I know you've participated in a game jam at the music school,
Mosma, Mid-Ocean School of Media Arts.
And different things. Like, even at the game jams, you're very accessible to whoever and different people, and being at the meetups and just talking to people. So I see like reciprocation in terms of like, you've gotten all these things, and my perspective on your contributions is you seem to be giving back to the community. So
I try to do that. It's good to hear that you think that. I think that's kind of like,
why is that important to you? Or I'm assuming it's
important. It is important to me. I think I'm in a point in life now where I'm trying to figure out how to do that well, because I think that's a thing that you can like, you know, you can just, it's one thing to just like be available and like answer questions if people ask of you, but then there's like a proactive sort of like, you are doing things to benefit the community intentionally, and like you have thought things through of like how you're gonna, you know, help people and stuff like that. So I think, I'm not saying I'm like doing that, but I'm at the point where I'm like starting to think about that, because I do like, I'm lucky to be very like secure in my job, and I just like do my work and sort of go through my normal processes. So I'm, you know, in my free time, I'm trying to think about like, what side projects can I do that actually will like do something interesting, or like help people, or like you know, where is effort best spent on stuff like that. I don't like have any answers or theories about like how best to do that, but that's something I try to like think about now that I have the ability to do so, sort of.
So what do you think about when you look into the future, like a year down the road, 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, like, are you just sort of going with the flow
in terms of what I'll be doing or whatever?
Just in a general sense, like where you want to be professionally and creatively create that word that you said.
I don't know. I don't think there's...
Do you think about that? Like, some people maybe aren't so much forward thinkers.
Yeah, well, I don't
in like the, kind of way.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. I don't think I've ever had a time in my past where I could have looked a year into the future and been able to predict it, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I think I'm used to that pattern of like getting into a situation and being like, oh, this is cool, let's do this. And then a year later, I'm in some unrecognizable new, like, uncharted terrain. Mm-hmm. And then I think the same thing where I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, I just got launched into this new thing. Guess I'll do this. And then the next year is some other unpredictable thing. So I think I'm still, like, in that mode of, like, I could never tell you what I expect to be doing in, like, two years, let alone 5 or something. But I guess I've never been the type of person that needs to know that. Right. Like, I do kind of just, like, go with the flow. And as long as I'm, like, happy with what I'm working on and, like, getting to work on cool stuff, then, like, yeah, sure, I'll just continue and see where I end up. But
what sort of, like, impact... I don't know if you think about this. This might be a loaded question, but what kind of impact would you sort of like to leave on the community, or just... creatively, or through your work, through games, through your job? What would you like, what would your thing be?
I don't know if I have I don't really have like a mission or anything for myself. I think a lot of the stuff I've been able to do with Owlchemy, especially, of like making games that can reach a lot of people and like sort of be accessible to people. Since we do a lot of VR stuff at Owlchemy, like bringing that new medium to like tons of people and consciously thinking about like how it can be made accessible to everyone and like making these wide-reaching things. That's really interesting to me. And I think a lot of the games I've made on my own have tried to do that, either by being like really simple or like friendly. Like I don't enjoy working on like violent projects and stuff, really. I know we were just talking about like shooting helicopters game, but like that's an outlier in like the types of stuff that I've made. Like I usually
it's not your kind of thing.
I mean, like it's fun to like that game is themed in a very just like like heavy metal guitars and like blowing stuff up like aesthetic, because that's what it was, but it's not I don't know, that's very, I think only like 2 or 3 maybe of like all games I've made have like a shooting mechanic or anything like that. I try to make it so like anyone could conceivably play it, like it's not offensive or violent, or and generally pretty simple to like get into. And, so I don't know if that's like a goal of like, I don't know if I'd say like, oh, I want everyone in the world to be able to like play it. Like that's not really a mission, but I think it's like a guiding principle that helps me like choose what I want to work on and stuff, is just like this sort of like friendly, accessible, like expansive thing, I guess.
So as we start to wrap up a little bit here, I like to end with a loaded question.
What?
So if you were to send yourself a message to your younger self, what would you say to like younger you, as the version of you that is interested in games maybe and hasn't sort of gone to a jam or any of these things? What would you say to yourself?
I don't know. I'm very happy with where I ended up, so it's like hard to think of like I wouldn't want to steer myself away. I would just be like, keep doing what you're doing or something. But probably like to actually help myself would just be like to not be afraid of doing the things that I knew I wanted to do at the time, because there's a lot of like leaps you have to make, right? To like, if you've never been to a jam before, like I was super nervous going to the room jam just because of like being in that like situation socially and like going out to this thing with like professionals that in this industry I knew nothing about. Like that's intimidating at first. And the same thing for like going to school with a bunch of other students who are obviously going to be like specialists and like working on this thing and whatever. So yeah, I just like don't worry about it. Stick to it. Like you're.
That's cool. Yeah. That's cool.
Not a. Yeah.
Cool. I really enjoyed that conversation. It's great to, including yourself. It's great to like try and go beyond sort of the like what you see from the outside, and you know, talk about what influenced certain games and kind of where you want to go and what you want to do and the journey to get there and everything in between and all the little details. I feel like it is a part of who you are. It's a part of who we are. It's cool to kind of like go back and forth on that. So I wanted to thank you for your time. Is there anywhere online like people can like follow your stuff? Like I know you have a Twitter account for your Sketchbot. Where's a good place to kind of...
GB Sketchbot is the Twitter for my sketches, which is much more active than my actual Twitter, which is at Graebor, Graebor. I don't think I've tweeted in like 2 months.
Oh, really?
Okay. So that's fun. But if you just...
Do you have a website?
Yeah, it's just my name, graemeborland.com.
Okay.
Not super up to date, but all my stuff is kind of like connected through there. If there's anything you care to find.
Cool. With that, this podcast is possible thanks in part to everyone that comes on it. So again, I appreciate your time. Daniel Bergman, who is a godsend. He has been helping out way more than he needs to. He's done all the video, or not video editing, the audio editing, and all kinds of things, and we sort of communicating back and forth. Dan Blair, equipment. At this point, there's so many people that are contributing that I always feel like I'm going to leave someone out. Christian made the logo for me. But long story short, I think it's really awesome to have all these people contributing. Whether you're listening and you're not contributing like art or technical thing, even just listening, I appreciate it. It's nice to share these stories and these conversations between two people that are just talking in front of each other, and then to sort of put that out there on the podcast. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah.